If you asked me who I hated the most at university, I would answer instantly. Abram Walker. No thinking. No hesitation. Just hearing that name was enough to make my heart race. Not from fear, but from pure irritation. Or at least, that's what I used to think. My name is Grayson Cole, a third-year communication major at Westbridge University, a large college on the west coast of America. The communication department here is notoriously brutal. Every class feels like a championship final. But in 3 years of studying, only 2 names had always sat at the very top of the leaderboard. Me and Abram Walker. If I got 98 points, Abram would get 99. If I won the summer scholarship, Abram would win the fall one. If I was chosen as project leader, Abram was the only person who dared to publicly challenge me in class. We weren't just rivals. We were thorns in each other's sides. Abram was a little taller than me, broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair that always looked slightly messy, like he'd just run through the wind, sharp jawline, gray-green eyes that always carried this annoyingly calm expression. That kind of calm that made me want to slam the desk. Every time a professor announced grades, the whole class would turn to look at us. Grayson, 97. Walker, 98. And Abram would just slightly tilt the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, just a tilt. I swear I wanted to throw my laptop at his face. Worse still, we took almost every single class together. Strategic communication, video production, multimedia journalism, visual storytelling. Wherever I was, Abram was there. And wherever Abram was, I had to work twice as hard. Everything got worse in the fall semester that year. Advanced Media Storytelling class. It was the hardest course in the department. And the final project counted for 60% of the total grade. Professor Carter, famous for being ruthless with students, walked into class carrying a thick stack of documents. He dropped it on the desk. This semester's project will be different. The whole class fell silent. I want you to produce a short documentary. Social issue theme, 20 minutes long, full production. Shooting, editing, scriptwriting, interviews. A few sighs echoed around the room. But Professor Carter wasn't finished. And you will work in pairs. The class immediately started whispering. I wasn't too worried. As long as I didn't get paired with Abram, I'd be fine. Professor Carter began reading the list. Tina and Lucas. Rachel and Daniel. I sat up straighter. Abram was sitting on the other side of the room, chin resting on his hand, staring out the window. Me and anyone, as long as it's not him, I thought. The list continued. Then Professor Carter looked down at the final sheet of paper. Grayson Cole. I lifted my head. And Abram Walker. The entire class went, ooh-hoo. I thought I'd misheard. Excuse me, I said. Professor Carter looked at me over his glasses. Any problem, Cole? I turned to Abram. He was looking at me too. No expression. Just looking. Yes, I said. There is. A few people chuckled. Professor Carter crossed his arms. You two are the top 2 students in this class. I want to see what happens when those 2 brains work together. Abram finally spoke. Or when they explode. Some people laughed. I stared at him. Trust me, I said coldly. If anyone blows up this project, it definitely won't be me. Abram raised an eyebrow. We'll see. Professor Carter slapped the desk. 3 months. No switching partners. No implants. He looked straight at us. Or you both fail the course. I clenched my jaw. Fantastic. 3 months working with the person I hated most. After class, I was stuffing my laptop into my backpack when someone stopped in front of my desk. Abram. He was tall enough that the light behind him cast his face slightly in shadow. We need to talk about the project. No, I said. We have to. I can do my part. You do yours. Abram shook his head. That's not how documentaries work. I crossed my arms. So what do you suggest? He dropped his backpack on the chair opposite and sat down. Looked me straight in the eye. We work like adults. I let out a laugh. You think I'm not mature? Abram shrugged. I think you like winning too much. And you don't. He looked at me for a few seconds, then said very calmly, No. I just like doing it well. I hated the way he said that, because it sounded true. We stayed silent for a few seconds. Then Abram slid a piece of paper toward me. Project idea. I looked down. A documentary about students working night shifts to pay tuition. I looked up. You came up with that? Yeah. Why? Abram looked out the window. Because it's a real story. I didn't say anything. Part of me didn't want to admit it, but the idea was really good. I exhaled. Fine. Abram looked back at me. Fine? Temporary truce. He smiled faintly. It was the first time I'd seen him actually smile. And it was strange. My heart skipped a beat. 3 days later, we started shooting the first scene. The university library. 11 p.m. The whole building was almost empty. I was adjusting the tripod when Abram brought over 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of me. I don't drink coffee, I said. Abram shrugged. You'll need it. I looked at the paper cup. Thanks. Don't thank me. Why? He opened his laptop. Because I just don't want this project to fail. I shook my head. You're really unbearable. Abram tilted the corner of his mouth. Feelings mutual. We worked until 2 a.m. that night, adjusting lighting, shooting interviews, writing questions, arguing about camera angles. This frame is crooked, I said. It's not crooked, Abram replied. I studied cinematography. So did I. But I scored higher. Abram looked at me. Only by 1 point. I was speechless. Around 2:30 a.m., we sat on the library floor reviewing the footage. Soft golden light. The laptop screen cast a pale blue glow on Abram's face. He was so focused he was gently biting his lower lip. I realized I was staring. For too long. Abram suddenly turned. What are you looking at? I startled. Nothing. You were looking at me. I was looking at the screen. Abram stayed silent for a few seconds, then said very quietly, You're a terrible liar, Grayson. My heart pounded in a strange way. I stood up and started packing the camera gear. It's late. Yeah. We walked out to the parking lot together. The California night air was a little cold. Wind blew across the grass in front of the library. I opened my trunk. Abram stood beside me. Neither of us spoke. Then he suddenly said, Have you ever thought, maybe we hate each other for a stupid reason? I turned to him. No. I have. Then you can stop competing. Abram looked straight into my eyes. And you? I opened my mouth, but couldn't answer, because for the first time in 3 years, I realized something that unsettled me. I wasn't sure I actually hated Abram Walker. Not completely. And that could be the start of a very big problem. 3 days after our first shoot, I began to notice an annoying truth. Working with Abram was disgustingly efficient. No missed deadlines. No half-assed work. Every time I sent a video edit at 1 a.m., Abram replied by 1:20. When I suggested changing the story structure, he already had 3 alternative outlines ready. The worst part? Most of Abram's ideas were good. Really good. And I hated having to admit it. One Friday night, we were sitting in the communication department's editing room. The clock on the wall read 12:47 a.m. The computer screen showed a student wiping tables in a late-night diner. Neon lights reflected on the glass. Abram was adjusting the audio. I sat beside him watching the timeline. This interview segment is too long, I said. Abram pulled his headphones down around his neck. Which part? From 4:10. He watched it again, silent for a few seconds, then said, You're right. I turned to him. You just agreed with me? Abram raised an eyebrow. I'm not stupid. I thought you believed you're always right. No. He looked at the screen. I just think I'm right most of the time. I laughed. A real laugh. And Abram laughed too. That moment was weird. No competition. No tensión. Just 2 people working together. We need more night footage, Abram said. I know. South Campus parking lot. Around 2 a.m. there are a lot of students getting off shift. I have a car. So do I. My car's better. Abram shook his head. You really can't stop competing, can you? I'm just stating facts. He looked at me for a few seconds, then smiled faintly. Fine. We'll take your car. I won. But for some reason, this victory felt completely different. 2 a.m. South Campus parking lot. The wind was colder than I expected. We set up the camera near a lamppost. In the distance, a few students were leaving the late-night dining hall. Abram was adjusting focus. I stood behind him watching the small monitor. Closer, I said. I know. I'm just reminding you. Abram turned. Do you ever shut up? No. Too bad. I smiled. After we finished shooting, we sat on the hood of the car to rest. The campus was almost asleep. Only the sound of wind and the vending machine humming. Abram opened a can of soda. Have you always wanted to make documentaries? He asked. I nodded. Since I was 16. Why? I looked at the dark lawn. My dad was a journalist. Abram listened quietly. He always said real stories are stronger than any script. I shrugged. I guess I believed him. Abram nodded lightly. Me too. Really? Yeah. I thought you only liked winning. He looked at me. The yellow light reflected in his gray-green eyes. I like telling stories. A long silence stretched between us. Then Abram said, Do you know what everyone in the department calls us? I don't want to know. Top 2. I exhaled. Sounds stupid, but accurate. No. I looked at him. There's only one person at the top. Abram tilted the corner of his mouth. True. My heart beat a little faster. I stood up and closed the trunk. Let's go. Abram nodded. But as we walked toward the cars, the wind suddenly blew hard. A piece of paper flew out of Abram's backpack. I picked it up. It was a printed email. Title: Westbridge Global Media Fellowship Application Announcement. I looked at Abram. You're applying for this? Abram paused slightly. Yeah. My heart sank. That scholarship was the most prestigious one in the department. Every year, only one student was chosen. That person would get a 6-month internship in New York at a major media company. I was planning to apply too. I just hadn't told anyone. Abram looked at me. You're applying too, right? I didn't answer right away. He smiled faintly. I figured. Yeah, I said. We stood facing each other in the dark parking lot. The air suddenly grew tense. Of course you're applying, Abram said. Of course. You think you'll win. And you? Abram shrugged. I think I have a chance. I looked at him. There's only one spot. Yeah. My heart pounded. Not from fear, but from something else. Over the next 3 weeks, our project progressed extremely fast. More shooting. More student interviews. First rough cut. We were together almost every day. Library. Editing room. Campus cafe. Even the department's sound booth. One night, we worked in the editing room until almost 3 a.m. Abram had fallen asleep at the desk. Laptop still open. Blue light glowing on his face. Hair falling over his forehead. I stood there watching for a few seconds, then realized I was thinking something dangerous. Abram was handsome. Not in an obvious, flashy way. But the longer I looked, the harder it was to look away. I shook my head. No, imutarat. This was Abram Walker, my rival. Abram stirred. His eyes opened. Who are you talking to? No one. He looked at me. You're lying again. I'm not. Abram sat up straight, then suddenly asked, Grayson, what? Have you ever thought we might have been friends if we weren't competing? The question made me freeze for a few seconds. I don't know. Yeah. Abram looked at the screen. Maybe we would have been. A stretch of silence. I looked at him. Maybe. Then Abram turned to me. The distance between us was very small. Smaller than I realized. The editing room light had dimmed. Everything was very quiet. I think we understand each other, Abram said softly. My heart pounded. I think so too. His gaze lingered on my lips for 1 second, then looked away. But that single second was enough to make my heart miss a beat. And for the first time in 3 years, I realized a terrifying truth. The person who stressed me out the most, the person I wanted to beat the most, the person who made my heart race the most, might be the same person. Abram Walker, my rival. There was one thing I started to realize in the following weeks. I had gotten used to having Abram around, used to it in a terrifying way. Before, every day of mine was a race. Grades, assignments, scholarships, internship opportunities. But since the documentary project began, my schedule almost always had the same line. Work with Abram, library, editing room, campus cafe, parking lot at 2 a.m. And I didn't know when. Our arguments had started turning into long conversations. One Sunday afternoon, we were sitting in a small cafe right across from campus. The California sun was gentle that day. Light streamed through the glass windows. Abram was rereading the interview script. I watched him for a while, then said, "Are you always this serious?" Abram didn't look up. "What do you mean? I've never seen you relax." He smiled faintly. "I'm sitting here drinking coffee on a Sunday afternoon. You're editing interview questions." Abram put the pen down. "Fine." He leaned back in his chair. "So what do you want me to do?" "I don't know. You started this conversation." I thought for a few seconds. "Do you have friends?" Abram looked at me like I'd asked a really dumb question. "Yes. I've never seen you hang out with anyone. I'm not the party type. Neither am I. But you have friends." I shrugged. "A few." Abram was silent for a few seconds, then said, "I have a younger sister." I was slightly surprised. "Really?" "Yeah. You've never mentioned her." "No one ever asked." We talked for about another hour. About family. About why we chose communication. About our favorite documentaries. Something strange happened. The more I talked to Abram, the more I realized he was different from the image I had in my head. Not a cold rival, but a person who was very real. 1 week later, we were shooting an interview scene off campus. Near the dorm area. The sun had just set. The sky was a soft orange. Students were walking around. I was adjusting the mic for the interviewee when Abram stood behind the camera. "Sound check," he said. "Good." We shot for about 20 minutes. When we finished, the student left. Abram kept the camera on his shoulder. I was winding up the mic cable when I heard him say, "Grayson." "What? Do you know what's weird?" "I'm scared to ask." Abram lowered the camera. "I used to think if I had to work with you, I'd go crazy." "Same." He smiled lightly. "But I like this project. I like it too. I think it's because we both try our best. Or because we don't want to lose." Abram looked at me. "Maybe both." We started packing up the equipment. The campus was quiet at that hour. The sky was getting dark. Streetlights turned on. I opened the trunk. Abram placed the tripod inside, then stood still for a few seconds. "Grayson." "Yeah. Have you submitted your fellowship application yet?" The question made me pause. "Not yet." "Me neither. Deadline is in 2 weeks." "Yeah." Neither of us said anything else. But we both knew we were thinking the same thing. Only one person would be chosen. That night, we went back to the editing room. The room was almost empty. Only the glow of the screens. We watched the rough cut of the film. The first 20 minutes. The story started with a student working the night shift at a fast food restaurant. Then moved to a student delivering food by car. Then a student working night duty at the hospital. When the video ended, I exhaled. "Not bad." Abram turned to me. "Not bad." "Okay, it's good." I shrugged. "Really good." He smiled. "You just complimented me. Don't get used to it." We started making more edits. Around 1 a.m., I stood up and stretched. My shoulders were sore. Abram was focused on adjusting audio. I watched him for a few seconds, then asked, "Abram, do you ever get tired?" "What do you mean?" "All of this. Being the best in class. Scholarships. Competing. Abram was silent for a moment. Then he took off his headphones.
I'm tired.
He said it very simply. But I also like it. Why? Because it makes me try harder. He looked at me. You're the same. I didn't deny it. A long silence followed. Then Abram said, but lately, there's something that's been distracting me. My heart stopped. Distracting you from what? He looked at me for a few seconds. Then said, it's not important. You just said it out loud. Abram smiled faintly. Are you always this curious? Only when I think it involves me. He raised an eyebrow. You think it involves you? I looked at him. I don't know. Abram looked at me longer than usual. The atmosphere in the editing room became different, silent. Then he turned back to the screen. We should fix the ending. My heart was racing. Around 2:30 a.m., we finished the new edit. I closed the laptop. Done. Abram nodded. Yeah. But we didn't stand up. We just sat there, in the dim light. Then Abram said softly, do you realize? Realize what? We don't argue as much as we used to. I smiled. Don't worry. I still want to beat you. Abram turned to me. His eyes were very calm. But there are some things. I don't want to win. My heart pounded hard. I don't understand. He looked at me for a long time, then said, maybe you do. The air became too quiet. I stood up. We should head back. Abram nodded. We walked out into the hallway together. The campus lights were dim. The night wind was cold. When we reached the parking lot, Abram suddenly said, Grayson, yeah, after this project ends, I don't know if we'll go back to how we were before. That sentence made me freeze. What do you mean? He looked at me. His expression was hard to read. We'll be rivals again. I swallowed. We've always been rivals. Abram nodded. Yeah. But his voice was quieter. And maybe that's what makes everything complicated. My heart beat faster. I didn't know how to answer, because for the first time, I started to fear something. Not losing the scholarship. Not losing to Abram. But what would happen if I won? 2 weeks before the project deadline, everything started to feel tense. Not between me and Abram, but between everything around us. The project was almost finished. But the Westbridge Global Media Fellowship deadline was also approaching. We both knew it, but neither of us mentioned it. One Tuesday night, I was sitting in the library writing the essay for my scholarship application. The laptop screen glowed white in front of me. The cursor blinked. Why do you deserve this fellowship? I hated that question, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I knew Abram also had a very good answer. I was typing when someone pulled out the chair across from me. I looked up. Abram, I figured you were writing your essay, he said. I figured you were too. He set his laptop down. Yeah. We looked at each other for a few seconds. Then both of us laughed at the same time. This is so weird, I said. We're competing for the exact same thing. Like always, Abram replied. But this time, it felt different. We worked in silence for about 30 minutes. Then Abram asked, how far have you gotten? Second paragraph. What did you say? I wrote about my dad. Abram nodded. The journalist. Yeah. That story is strong. I looked at him. You read my essay? Abram shrugged. You talked about it in class last year. I was a little surprised. You remember? Yeah. He said it very casually. But it made my heart warm a little. I wrote about my sister, Abram said. Really? Yeah. Why? He looked at the screen for a few seconds, then said, my family isn't rich. I've had to work since freshman year to help pay tuition for both of us. I didn't say anything. I didn't know that. Abram always seemed in control of everything, never complained, never looked tired. But now I was starting to understand part of the reason. We continued writing. Around 11 p.m., Abram closed his laptop. I need some air. Me too. We walked out of the library. The night was colder than usual. The campus was quiet. Golden lights stretched along the small path. We walked side by side. Neither of us spoke for a few minutes. Then Abram asked, Grayson, yeah, if you win the scholarship, you'll go to New York, right? The question made me pause. Definitely. Me too. I smiled lightly. I guess we can't both win. Abram shook his head. No. We stopped near the large lawn in the middle of campus. A light wind blew. Abram looked at me. Have you ever thought we could be friends? The question caught me off guard. I think we almost are already. He smiled softly. Almost. Then Abram said something that made my heart sink. But this scholarship is going to change everything. The next day, we shot the final scene for the documentary. A student leaving work at 4 a.m. The sky was just beginning to lighten. Pale blue light of dawn. Abram stood behind the camera. I adjusted the mic. Rolling, he said. Rolling. The shot was beautiful. The student walked out of the convenience store, tired but still smiling. A very real image. When we finished, Abram turned off the camera. We looked at each other. We have enough footage, I said. Yeah. So that means the project is almost done. On the way back to campus, we stopped at the 24-hour diner. The same small burger place. We sat at our usual table near the window. Abram drank a milkshake. Ate French fries. Do you know what's the funniest thing? Abram said. What? If it weren't for this project, I would never have talked to you like this. Same here. We were too busy competing. I looked at him. You still want to beat me, right? Abram looked straight into my eyes. Yeah. I smiled. At least you're honest. We left the diner around 6 a.m. The sky was bright now. Students were starting to head to early classes. We stopped in front of my car. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. Then Abram said, Grayson, yeah, have you ever thought if things were different, we could? He stopped. Could what? Abram shook his head. Nothing. But his eyes said something else. I felt my heart racing. A heavy silence. Then Abram said softly, we should focus on the scholarship. Yeah. Not let anything distract us. That sentence felt like a wall. I nodded. Right? But as Abram turned and walked toward his car, I realized something that unsettled me. The story between us was no longer simple. It wasn't just the project. It wasn't just competition. It was something growing between us. Something neither of us dared to name. And I was starting to fear that, by the end of this semester, it wouldn't just be one person losing the scholarship. It might be both of us losing something much more important. The final week before the project submission, Westbridge campus looked like an academic battlefield. Students sleeping in the library, laptops open everywhere, empty coffee cups lined up on tables. But for me, that week revolved around only two things. The documentary project. And Abram. We practically lived in the editing room. The small room, cold white lights, large screen on the wall. Every day we edited every tiny detail. Audio. Transitions. Background music. Abram sat at the control desk, headphones around his neck. I think the opening needs to be stronger, he said. I think so too, I replied. We have that sunrise shot from the convenience store. Exactly. I want to start with that shot. I thought for a few seconds, then nodded. Okay. Abram turned to me. You just agreed with me for the second time this week. I'm not keeping score. You should. I smiled. Moments like that started happening more often. We were no longer two people trying to prove who was right. We were two people who both wanted the film to be the best it could be. That made me both proud and anxious, because I knew this project could become the best thing we'd ever done. And when it ended, everything else would end too. One night around 1 a.m., I stood up and stretched. We should take a break. Abram didn't take his eyes off the screen. After this part. I've heard that 3 times already. He sighed, then took off his headphones. Fine. We left the editing room and walked into the hallway. The vending machine hummed softly. Abram bought 2 cans of soda. Handed me one. Thanks. I'm starting to get used to you saying thank you. I'm trying to be polite. Abram smiled softly. We sat on the hallway floor. Quiet. I have a question, Abram said. I'm scared of it already. If we weren't rivals. Yeah. What do you think we would be like? I looked at the soda can in my hand. I don't know. Maybe friends. Abram tilted his head. Just friends. The question made me look at him. Abram's eyes were very calm, but there was something deeper. My heart raced. I don't know, I repeated. We went back to the editing room, but the atmosphere had changed. I realized I was starting to notice small details. The way Abram tilted his head when watching footage. The way he unconsciously bit his lip when thinking. The way the screen light reflected in his eyes. Things I had never noticed before. Or maybe I had tried not to notice. Around 2:30 a.m., we finished the near-final cut. Abram played the video from the beginning. 20 minutes. We sat in silence watching. The story opened with the dawn scene. Students leaving their shifts. Honest interviews. Long nights. Dreams. When the video ended, the room was silent. I think we did it, I said. Abram nodded. Yeah. Then he turned to me. Do you know what surprised me the most? What? I didn't think we would work well together. I smiled lightly. Me neither. A stretch of silence. Then Abram said, Grayson. Yeah. I want to tell you something. My heart raced. Go ahead. Abram looked at me for a few seconds, as if weighing it. Then he shook his head. Not the right time. Why? Because... He exhaled. We still have the scholarship. That sentence pulled me back to reality. 3 days later, the project was officially submitted. Professor Carter watched the final version. He didn't say much, just nodded a few times, then looked at us. I don't say this often. The whole class was silent. But this is one of the best student documentaries I've ever seen. My heart pounded. Abram stood up straighter too. Professor Carter looked at both of us. You two did well. After class, everyone left. Only Abram and I remained in the hallway. We should celebrate, I said. Yeah. Burger. Burger. We went to that same 24-hour diner. This time it was busier. Students talking loudly. We sat at our usual corner table. I think we deserve an A, I said. Abram raised an eyebrow. Just an A. I'm being humble. He smiled. You're not humble. Neither are you. After we finished eating, we stepped outside. The night air was cool. The campus was quieter. We walked slowly toward the parking lot. Scholarship deadline is tomorrow, Abram said. I know. I already submitted. I looked at him. Me too. A stretch of silence. We stopped under a lamppost. Golden light shone down. Abram looked at me. Grayson. Yeah. No matter who wins. Yeah. I want you to know that. He paused. My heart pounded. Working on this project with you was the best part of the semester. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then I smiled softly. Same for me. But as we stood there under the night light, I felt one thing very clearly. The project was over. The scholarship applications had been submitted. And soon, an email would arrive. An email that would decide which one of us would go to New York. And which one would stay. What scared me the most wasn't losing. It was what would happen between me and Abram when the results were announced. 1 week after submitting the scholarship applications, Westbridge campus entered the most uncomfortable waiting period. The results could be announced anytime. Today, tomorrow, or right when you were opening your email in the library. Every communication student knew about the Westbridge Global Media Fellowship. But only 2 names were mentioned the most. Me and Abram. One Wednesday afternoon, I was sitting in the library when my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Everyone's betting. I frowned. Betting on what? Who wins the scholarship? I sighed. Don't tell me. 3 seconds later. Currently Abram is leading at 60%. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then replied, Great. That night I met Abram in the editing room. We no longer had a project to work on. but we both still came there out of habit. Abram was watching our documentary again. How many times have you watched it now? I asked. Fourth. Cocky. Just checking for errors. I sat down in the chair next to him. The video was playing the dawn scene at the convenience store. The student walking out after their shift. I still like this part, Abram said. Me too. A stretch of silence. I heard people are betting, Abram said. I know. What percentage are you at? 40. He raised an eyebrow. Sorry. Same. Abram smiled. I didn't expect that. Neither did I. We continued watching the video. About 10 minutes later, Abram turned off the screen. Grayson. Yeah. If I win. That sentence made my heart stop. Yeah. I'll go to New York. I know. I'll have to leave campus. Yeah. Abram looked at me. And you? I shrugged. I'll keep studying. He was silent for a few seconds. Then asked, would you hate me if I win? I looked at him. No. You're lying. I'm not. Abram looked straight into my eyes. You hate losing. True. But you don't hate me. I didn't answer. 3 days later, the email still hadn't arrived. That was driving everyone in the department crazy. In class, Professor Carter was lecturing about storytelling. But I was only staring at my phone. Abram was sitting on the other side of the room. He was doing the same. At the end of class, Carter said, I know you're all waiting for the scholarship results. The class laughed. I don't have any information. A few groans. After class, Abram walked with me into the hallway. Are you checking your email every 5 minutes too? He asked. No. You just checked. I was just looking. Abram smiled. We walked out to the large lawn in the middle of campus. The afternoon air was a little cold. Students were studying on the grass. Have you ever thought about New York? Abram asked. Of course. That city is completely different from California. Have you ever been there? No. Then why are you so sure? Abram shrugged. I read a lot. Me too. We sat down on the grass. A comfortable silence. Then Abram said, I want to ask you something. Go ahead. If you win, you'll leave right away, right? Definitely. No hesitación. Why would I hesitate? Abram didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the library building. Then said very quietly, just curious. That evening, I was in my dorm room when my phone buzzed. A new email. My heart pounded hard. I opened it immediately, but it was only a class announcement. I sighed. 2 days later, Friday, I was sitting in the campus cafe when Abram walked in. He looked at me. Have you received it yet? Not yet. Me neither. We ordered coffee, sat across from each other. This feeling sucks, I said. Yeah. I hate waiting. Same. Right at that moment, Abram's phone buzzed. He looked down. His expression changed slightly. My heart immediately started racing. Email? I asked. Abram nodded slowly. I swallowed. From the scholarship? Yeah. The air between us suddenly became heavy. Open it, I said. Abram looked at me for a few seconds, then opened the email. His eyes scanned the screen. I didn't dare breathe. A few seconds later, Abram looked up. His expression was unreadable. Grayson, my heart almost stopped, because in that moment, I realized one thing. The scholarship result wouldn't just decide one person's future. It might decide what was growing between us too.